Hi, my name is Angie. This is our Black Diamond safety video. I'm going to go over all the equipment and how to use it properly and safely, so that way everybody in the gym is always safe. So check it out. Okay, so this is our Olympic size beam. It's a normal height beam, so this is what you'll see in a normal gym. You'll notice that you can't really see the legs. The legs are actually underneath the floor. We did that so that way we don't stub our toes. It's made out of like steel legs, and then it's kind of soft, but it's really not that soft. It's squishy, but it's also with leather, but if a kid falls off, it's gonna feel like a burn. So just an FYI. There's a certain way that you get on the beam. You have to jump up, put one leg over, feet behind, and then stand up. And that's how everybody should get on the beam, and then when they dismount off the beam, they have to jump off and bend their knees. So that's how you get on and off. For adjusting the beams, you will never have to adjust the beams. If you ever need to adjust the beams, you'll have me or Rachel do that, and you'll meet Rachel later. If we go down this way, I'll show you other beams. Okay, so this is our medium high beam. So it's a little bit lower than the other ones, but it's just the same, feels the same. You get it on it the same, the hardware is the same, there's no difference. This is our medium beam. Again, same hardware. This one's a little bit different because it has red legs. It adjusts a little bit different than the other ones, so again, you won't have to adjust it. And then below it, you have the low beam. It's a little bit longer, it's closer to the floor, less room for failure. And then after that, you have a floor beam, which is pretty squishy. And the kids like to use it because it's easy. And that's it for those beams. Okay, so underneath all of the bigger beams, the floor is a level and flat surface, so there's not much room for failure when you're walking around. When you get to the floor beams, you'll see that there's different mats and different textures. Just remind the kids that they need to be careful, and there obviously shouldn't be any running around. Also, sometimes the mats kind of slide out. You want to make sure that you push them back in. So just be careful of the floor surfaces anywhere you go in the gym, but for beam especially, because you don't want unevenness, especially putting a beam on a squishy end and a hard surface, it just kind of messes with the beam. That's it for that one. Okay, this is our fat beam, or what we call as chubs. It's a wider beam. It's a lot softer. It's covered in carpet, so it's a lot softer all the way around. It's a lot bouncier too, so the kids have a little bit easier time learning new skills on it because it's softer. There's not a hard surface that they're going to land on. But also next to the beams, you have one big pole. It's a structure pole. A lot of the kids will try to lean on it standing on top of the beam. You want to make sure that they don't lean on it or pull the rope down, because the rope will swing. Let me get it down. And it'll go out far. So you want to make sure that this is always put away when they're on beam and nobody touches it. Okay, so underneath the beams, you'll see that there's 3 mats. They're all touching, because anytime you have mats underneath the beam, you want to make sure that they're all together, because when they fall off, they want to land on the same size surface. What you don't want is the mats to be separated, for one of them to land this way or to fall off this way, because then you get fractured ankles, broken bones, which we obviously don't want. So always make sure that the mats are always tucked in and really snug put together. Also, the reason for the matting as well is for the littler ones who are not chest height, they should never be on the beam. So if they're not chest height, what we recommend you doing is stacking mats on top of each other, so that way their chest comes up to the beam. If their chest is below the beam, they shouldn't be on the beam to begin with. So just make sure you stack mats properly under the beam anytime you use them. Okay, so there is a difference between this beam and the other beam that I showed you earlier. This one is the same height, it's still Olympic size beam, but this is a reflex beam. So this is more for like back handspring stuff for the gymnasts who are a little bit higher levels to do different things on. So it makes noise, and it moves a little bit, and that's normal, so don't freak out when the kids get on it, because some of the kids think it's broken. It's not really broken, it just allows for more movement. Okay, so this is our floor. It's a spring floor, so it bounces, so every time someone walks on it, they freak out because it's a little bit more cushiony. It's meant to do that. We have our windows on the floor. Just make sure when kids are doing things against the wall that they don't kick the edge of the wall, or if they do, that you give them ice, obviously, but try to keep them away from the windows. Kids like to try and sit in the windows. Don't let them sit in the windows. Also, we have a door here, and they try to unlock it. Make sure they don't touch the door. Staying away from the windows in general is key. Over here, where the mats get a little bit taller, some of the kids like to try and climb on the mats. Half of them aren't stable, so you want to make sure that they don't climb them, especially up here on the cheese. They'll try to sit up on top, and it will fall down, and it's pretty heavy. Okay, so there's floor 1 and floor 2. Floor 1 is this side of floor. Floor 2 is on this side. Floor 2 is usually more of the open area, whereas floor 1 we usually stack the mats against the wall, so that way they're out of the way. But just so you know, when you're looking at a rotation schedule, there's floor 1, floor 2, and then for team they usually use the entire floor, but just so you know the difference of the floors. Okay, so this is our vaulting table. This piece of equipment is pretty heavy. You will never need to adjust this piece of equipment, but just so you know and you're familiar with it, it is very heavy. It feels like a basketball on top. Underneath is where you adjust it. You, again, won't ever have to adjust it. Just make sure kids aren't playing with it or sticking their fingers in there, because the last thing we want is to pinch a finger or anything like that. The floor that vaults on is flat floor. There's only like a thin layer of carpet bonded foam, so it's not springy. There's not much cushion for anyone who falls. So when they're running, it's a little bit easier to run on. Okay, so this is our competitive team board. Again, this one looks like a basketball on the top. When you are on the floor using springboards for classes, you will never use this one. Again, it's for the competitive girls only because it is harder, it's stiffer, it's a lot harder to use, and obviously if you haven't trained to use it, you probably shouldn't be using it. On the inside, there's 5 springs. If any of the springs are ever broken in any springboard, you want to make sure that you never use it and let me or Rachel know, and then we'll replace it. Don't try to replace it, you'll probably end up cutting your finger. Also on the bottom, there is where the cover ends. You want to make sure you don't drag these. When you pick these up, they are pretty heavy, so make sure that you either have help. If you can't do it by yourself, don't have the kids ever move them. But for this board, there's also a marking that we use for the competitive girls so that they know where to jump. You always want to make sure that they jump right here. They never want to jump on the edge of either of the boards because it's the stiffer part. One they'll slip off this way, the other one they'll get no bounce and it's kind of landing on flat ground and it hurts. For this one, this is our mini tramp. It's heavy, so make sure when you put it up on the wall that it's not where the wheels are. The wheels should be up on top, and then there should be the bars on the bottom. Again, this one's also a lot stiffer, so make sure the kids, anytime they jump on anything, that they try it out before they run and jump onto it so that they feel how hard it's going to be when they actually run and jump with more momentum. For rec kids, depending on their size and weight, these are the boards you're going to use. The boards with more springs are going to be stiffer. The ones with less springs are going to be a little bit more bouncy. This one you'll use for smaller kids. It only has 3. Again, you're going to want to jump in the middle so that way it doesn't hurt and you actually get the real bounce that you need for them. As you see, they're all end up on the wall. You want to make sure you put the small end down and then the heavier part on top. Again, make sure that nobody moves them other than a teacher. If you need help, always ask. That one actually has wheels, so it's easier to move so you can roll it. Okay, so this is our air floor. It's a rubber piece of equipment that's filled with air, so it's bouncy. The competitive girls use it to do their tumbling on it, and they usually set up right here. They usually go into the pit. If they are out, feel free to use them, but it's definitely not a trampoline, so when the kids are doing back handsprings and whatnot, don't think that this is going to help them. This is actually going to make it harder than a trampoline because it's a lot stiffer. This just helps with the competitive girls because they know how to use it correctly. Also, there's a lot of Velcro on it. Just be careful. Most of the pieces of equipment have Velcro. Make sure not to scratch yourself or get hair stuck in it. It's happened. But as far as the air track, it's pretty easy equipment to use. Just make sure that if it gets low, to let Rachel or I know. You won't ever need to pump it up, but if it gets low, let us know. Okay, so this is our tumble track. It's a long trampoline. It's pretty bouncy. It is closer to the wall, so that's why we have the pads to make sure when anybody's using it that they go straight. They never want to go this way on the tumble track. They always want to go back this way. With a trampoline, any trampoline you use, you want to make sure you go check what's underneath it to make sure there's nothing that the kids can jump on. Also, when they jump off, they have to jump off in a safe landing position. 2, the mats, you want to make sure that the mat's all the way tucked in. I've left it out on purpose because there's a gap. You want to make sure that there's no gap so nobody lands in the middle and hurts themselves. You want to make sure it's pushed all the way in. Also, when the kids are waiting, you want to make sure that they're waiting on the side, never on the walls unless like it's a last case scenario. Also, when they are on it, some of the kids like to try and walk back on it. You want to make sure that they don't because they'll end up like grabbing the poles or falling off for some reason. So just be very careful because it is close to pretty dangerous things. For the most part, it's a pretty fun piece of equipment. Also, a lot of the kids, when they try to walk on this, they realize that it's not so comfortable because it's made out of springs underneath. So just be careful. If any of the springs ever come loose, let me or Rachel know. We'll fix it. We have replacement springs. It very rarely happens. So just keep an eye on any piece of equipment. Again, you always want to check it before you go on it. Okay, so this is our Resi Pit. It's a big old squishy landing mat just like this one, but it's bigger. For the most part, it's one of the safer pieces of equipment. The only thing is that it does come up a little bit higher than the floor, so make sure kids don't trip over it or roll their ankles. Right above it, you have our pit bar. No Rett kids should ever be using the pit bar. It's more for competitive girls. But when they walk from the tumble track, a lot of them will try to swing through the cables. Make sure they don't swing through the cables because the cables do shred. When they are using this piece of equipment, you want to make sure that they go up through the platform, which Austin is actually sitting on. When you're on the bar, you're allowed to swing both ways. Will you go ahead and swing? Which way? Either way. So you can swing this way, but obviously if they're a little bit taller, they need to watch their feet. Go ahead and turn around. Turn around? Yep. I'm going to swing that way. Or they can swing this way. Just anytime they let go, they're going to let go backwards. Let go that way. And then on the platform, there's a step here that you can get on. Again, like I said, if you're not teaching competitive gymnastics, you probably won't be up there, but just in case. Also, there's a little lip underneath that the kids like to hide in, like during camp. Make sure that they don't go under there because there's bolts and nuts that they can cut themselves on, so it's just not safe all the way around. It's padded everywhere, so for the most part, it's okay. It's big enough for kids to see it so they don't run into it. As far as adjusting that pit bar, you will never need to adjust it. Rachel or I will adjust it. Just recognize if it does look a little sideways to let one of us know. But other than that, it's off limits. Okay, so this is our spring-free trampoline. As you can see, they're not springs, they're like rods. It's a lot more of a bounce. People think it's not going to be as bouncy, but it's actually really bouncy. When you get on, they're also made out of rods, so it bends when you stand on it. So just be careful when kids are getting on. They don't expect that right away. Also, there's 2 zippers when you come in. Make sure that the kids unzip them and zip them both back up when they're coming in and out. I've made a lovely sign so they'll see that, no worries. Then when they climb in, they'll close them one at a time. But one thing you want to make sure is that when they go, that it's far enough away from the wall because they can eventually hit it this way or this way. Nobody's ever gotten to touch the light, so I think you'll be okay. And then when they climb out, they need to make sure that they sit down because they'll try to jump out or turn, and these stairs aren't very stable. They kind of move. And then if you ever needed to move it away from the wall, it's not too heavy, so you can move it away. So that way if they do get kind of close, that they don't hit it as hard as they would before. Also, anytime you go on a trampoline, you want to make sure you check underneath it. We have stuff underneath it, but there's nothing underneath it that will make it too detrimental where they'll actually feel it when they bounce. But other than that, and then these rods, they're here. Make sure that the kids don't pull on them. They think it's fun, but it actually pulls down the net. So just make sure that they keep their hands off of it. And then, yeah. Okay, so this is the strap bar. It's a little bit different than the rest of the bars because one, it's skinnier. 2, there's a PVC pipe. It slides. Again, no Rett kids should be on this. Only competitive girls should be on it. The reason being is they'll go to grab it and they'll fall off. We have these little straps that they put on, and they strap themselves in. So anytime someone's going, make sure that you're out of their way because they'll be swinging around. When kids get on, some of the kids like to get on the block, which is fine, but then it's more tempting to use the bar, so make sure that they don't get on the block to begin with. Also on the block, sometimes the screws pop out a little bit, so you want to make sure that they don't put their feet on the screws. There's stairs on the side. Make sure that they use the stairs when they're climbing up and down. So these are our floor bars. We use them for progressions of teaching the skills. They're pretty light. They're not too heavy. They're not too dangerous, so just when the kids are picking them up, just make sure that they don't swing and hit somebody with them. They should never be walking on them like this. They should only be doing either handstands or gymnastic skills related. The next thing we have 4 bars is a handstand trainer. It's like a huge slingshot, and the kids like to play with it or sit on it or lay on it. Make sure that they don't go anywhere near it. It's for the competitive girls only, and it's not all the way stable. The only thing holding it down is this mat, so it does move. So it's just sketchy all the way around, so make sure that the kids don't use it. These are uneven bars. There's a set of parallel bars that I'll show you later, but these ones are separate. They're higher and lower from the low bar and the high bar. When we're using any type of bar, if you're hanging from it, you're only allowed to have up to like a foot of a drop. So you always want to stack mats like we have underneath this one, so that way the kids don't hurt themselves when they drop. 1 kid per bar, and there's never should be 2 people on a bar at the same time for collision purposes. When they're on top of the bar, it's the same situation as the beam. They need to be chest height, if not stack the mats. Because if they aren't chest height, then they'll have a longer drop and more room for broken bones, all that kind of good stuff. Climbing onto the bars, a lot of kids think it's fun to go through the sides. It's actually probably the unsafest way to do it. One reason the cables are made of metal and they do shred from time to time, and it does make a deep cut, so you want to make sure that they don't touch the cables in general. When they climb up, you want to make sure you have a stable mat like this one that doesn't move, and they'll climb up this way and go on the high bar. When they're swinging on the high bar, they're going to swing from this direction, not this direction. And then when they let go from swinging on the bar, they let go backwards. These are adjustable bars. The ones that I will show you later, the rec bars, they actually don't adjust. Okay, so we're going to show you how to adjust the bars. Me and Rachel, lovely Rachel came to help us. So you always want to do the outsides first. So when pulling the cables down, you want to squeeze them together and then pull the yellow cord down. But then once you get close to your hand, go ahead and pull the rest down so you don't pinch your fingers. And then when you adjust the outside on that side, there's a handle that you'll turn. And you want to make sure your hands are on top, never down here, because then you'll pinch your fingers with the metal. And you'll pull it down this way, all the way down. Okay, so when adjusting, you want to take this handle and untwist it so it's loose. Then you'll pull the pin. Sometimes the pin will get stuck. You want to push the bar up or down, and then you'll slide it down, and you want to hear a click. Once it clicks, that means it's in place, because if it's not in place, it'll slide down if someone gets on top of it. And then to tighten it, you'll tighten it back up. And then anytime you tighten or loosen a bar, you want to make sure that you get back on it, and then make sure that it's tight and that it doesn't move. Okay, so we have 3 different ropes in the gym. The first one that I showed you in the beam area, that one, it has less apparatuses surrounding it, so it's a little bit easier to use. The one I'm going to show you right now is actually surrounded by the bar, so it's a little bit more sketchy when you use it. When you swing kids on it, just make sure that they have that they sit on top of it and that they cross their ankles, so that way they don't slide off. Always ask them if they're comfortable going higher or lower, because some of them will freak out if you push them too high, or they'll just let go and bail, and you don't want that. Also, when you're pushing, you want to make sure you stand on this side of the rope, because if you don't stand on this side of the rope, there's a chance that they'll go this way and hit the cables of the bars. So we want to make sure we're safe as possible, so that way we can just pull them out of the way. Also, coming this way or towards the pole, just make sure you're safe, and that way they don't hit you or anything else. When climbing the rope, you want to make sure that they climb hand over hand, and then only let them go as high as they're comfortable with going, or that they're strong enough to go, because they forget that they have to come back using the same muscles, and they come back down hand over hand. Okay, so we have 2 sets of rings. I'm going to go ahead and show you the lower set of rings. These are our older set. They're a little bit lower for the little ones. So there's 2 different ways they can get on the rings or use the rings, just like the bars. They can hang for it, or they can go on top of it. So if they go on top of the rings in a front support, that I'm going to have Austin show you in a second, they have to have a mat that makes them chest height to the ring. But if they're swinging, it's just no more than a foot drop. Will you bring that mat over and then go ahead and do it? So Austin's going to go ahead and jump to front support using a mat. It's fine. And they can jump up and go to front support, or they can just grab the rings if they're tall enough. Thank you. I'll call you in a second. For these rings, when they use them, you want to make sure that they don't swing like this all the way through. They are allowed to spin with you supervising them this way. No kid should be going on the rings unless they are a rec student. Camp kids are allowed to spin on them, but they're not allowed to go upside down. They're also not allowed to put their feet inside of the rings, which kids like to do when they're upside down. But again, rec students should only be going upside down anyways, and they know better than to do that. For these rings, every once in a while, this one likes to get loose, so just make sure, just with anything, you check the equipment before you go on it to make sure that it don't come off. Okay, so these are our toddler set of rings. Again, you want to check them before you go on them. This is more for the swinging, whereas the other ones are more for muscle ups and whatnot. When the kids are on these set of rings, you want to make sure, again, that they only spin on them. You don't want them swinging like this for this reason. Austin's going to go ahead and show you, because a lot of them will get tempted and try to swing so high that they touch the rings behind them. And I don't want them to hit their head or anything. Going upside down, again, they need to make sure that they don't have more than a foot drop. Go ahead and come down. And then if they need help getting up, make sure you use the stable mat just like we had used before. Also, these ones are also close to the pole, so just make sure that if they do fall, that you follow them through. For rings, for the most part, if they're upside down, you should be spotting them at all times. There never should be a time where they're not being spotted. Okay, so this rope out of our 3, this one goes into the pit, which is fun, so that way the kids can do it. When you do it, there's a certain way you have to do it. You want to make sure that their back's facing the pit and that they cross their ankles just like before when you swing them. And also when you swing them in, you want to make sure that you follow them in. You don't want to just toss them in and expect them to let go at the right time. Ow. You want to follow them this way and then make sure they let go and kind of hold it there, because sometimes they won't let go and then they'll eat it on the hard part of the floor. So make sure you follow them all the way in, and we're actually going to demonstrate that, so Rachel's going to help me. So you want to make sure they sit down, cross their ankles, back towards the pit. You just want to go on one. Okay. And then let go. Woo. Okay, so this is our foam pit. It looks like a lot of fun, but it's probably the scariest place in the gym for me. It freaks me out. But I'm going to go ahead and explain how it's made, so that way you have a little bit better understanding of what it is. It's a 6-foot hole, and then 2 feet up is a trampoline bed, and then the rest of the 4 feet of the hole is filled with foam. So everybody thinks it's an endless pit when you jump in, but when you get in, you can actually make it jump and bounce. So just be careful. Before kids go in the pit, you always go over the rules. The rules are there's no jumping on their heads, no diving, no jumping on their bellies because they're back hole accordion, no jumping on top of other people, no throwing foam because the foam kind of flakes off and gets in kids' eyes, no burying themselves so that way they don't get jumped on. Kids aren't allowed to jump off of anything higher than their waist. So I will show you later a block that they can jump off of. When they get in and out, they need to make sure that they're climbing out on the sides where people are not actually going, because a lot of them will try to exit away where people are actually doing skills and get hurt. So make sure that when they come in and out that they're out of the way of anyone else. Okay, so I would be able to jump off of this piece of equipment because it's either to my waist or below it. Little ones when they jump in, so 2- and 3-year-olds, the ones for kinder gym or preschool, I wouldn't recommend them jumping off anything higher than this because their bones are still really soft and they'll get whiplash. So for the younger ones, make sure that you have something that is lower to the ground. Also with the little ones, you want to make sure that you never pull any kid out with their hands or their shoulders, because you don't want their shoulders to dislocate. So you want to get underneath their shoulder, more in their armpit, to pull them out. If, say, they get stuck and they're a little bit too heavy for you to pull out, what I would recommend putting in is a cheese or another mat so they can climb on top of that. Speaking of mats in the pit, you never want to have an 8-inch in the pit and the kids jump on it, because it moves and it's an unstable surface to land on. So you want to make sure they're always either just jumping on the foam or not on anything else. Mats in the pit, when you put mats in the pit for the competitive girls, you'll see mats being put in. If they're still in there, you want to make sure that you have them taken out so that way the pit doesn't get shoved down to the bottom. That way it's still fluffy and it's still safe for kids to use. If there's ever injury in the pit, everything stops and you need to come get me or Rachel immediately, and everything stops in the gym. Pit injuries are probably one of the most serious injuries, so we need to make sure that we take it very seriously. There's usually people around to watch, but make sure when you are in the pit that you're always on the outside of the pit, never in the pit with the kids, so that way you can see and tell the kids when to come in and out of the pit. They should never be unattended. If someone does get injured in the pit, you want to make sure that everybody climbs out and then the one that is injured stays inside. Another couple things to remember when you're going into the pit is make sure that you're not flipping. Only kids that are a level 3 or higher or uncompetitive are allowed to flip in. A lot of the little kids can go ahead and do cartwheels in. Handstands are okay in as long as they're strong enough to hold a handstand long enough. But forward rolls are fine to go from the edge of the floor into the pit is fine. When you are coming into the pit, only feet or bottoms go in first. Obviously no heads, like I said, no diving. A lot of kids will try to stack mats and jump from those. Make sure that they don't jump from any stacked mats that's not chest height or waist height. And then also with the platform, just be mindful of it when kids are jumping in because some of them forget that it's there. Thank you for watching Black Diamond Kids Center safety video. If you're ever in doubt, feel free to ask. Nobody's ever gonna make you feel stupid for asking any questions because this is a dangerous sport and dangerous equipment. Just always remember safety first.